I'm Mike Dowdy, and this is the School Leadership Show. In this episode, I interview Andrew Sykes of Habits at Work. His company helps organizations of all kinds tap their greatest source of competitive advantage, their people. Andrew and I talk about the pivotal habits that are essential for helping companies and schools foster the health, happiness, and security of all their employees. Time absolutely flew during this interview. Andrew had so many great things to share about how to develop habits to improve all aspects of your professional and personal life that we might have to do a part two. You can reach Andrew by email at andrew@habitsatwork.com and on Twitter at SykesAndrew. Enjoy this interview with Andrew Sykes. And just another note, there was something goofy going on with the audio during this, so my voice is a little bit lower than Andrew's. This was the first one that I recorded over Skype, so I'm still working out the bugs. So thanks for your patience and enjoy the interview. So I'm here with Andrew Sykes. Andrew, thank you so much for joining me today. I've been eagerly anticipating this interview ever since I heard you speak earlier, well, late last year, but earlier this school year. So welcome to the podcast, and you could just tell folks a little bit about yourself and your work with Habits at Work.
Thank you. I'm really thrilled to be on the podcast and looking forward to our conversation. You can tell from my accent that I was born and bred in South Africa, but I've been in the US for the last decade and have lived and worked on all 5 continents in the area of health, wellness, performance, habit creation, and the link between people's habits and their personal and business outcomes. I now lead a team of researchers at the Behavioral Research Applied Technology Laboratory, or BRAT Lab, as well as a team of consultants at Habits at Work. And Habits at Work is a company committed to reinventing the world of work, whether that's in formal for-profit companies, in government, school districts, or other organizations. And what we mean by reinventing it is, despite the fact that there are many new companies with new approaches, there still seems to be a pervasive way of thinking about the contract between employees and employers, and specifically the source of competitive advantage for employers. We believe that many companies still think, and many employees still believe, that the route to profitability is somehow at the expense of employees. Now, I know that many companies say that people are their most important asset, but it's also true that most employees will say that they are at least sometimes, if not always, stressed. They will blame their work environment or their job on not having enough time to invest in their health. And generally, they would say that they leave work each day just a little bit less healthy or happy or financially secure than when they arrived that morning. And our research says that's exactly the wrong view to take to build a sustainable competitive advantage in the knowledge economy. And that really what matters is having healthy, happy, and secure employees as an access to organizations or companies that flourish in the future. So we really, go ahead.
I was going to say, you've done a lot of work with companies, but I want to make sure folks understand that you've also worked with some pretty significant public school districts, right?
Yes. In fact, I would say school districts have made up perhaps 1/3 of our work in the last decade. So we do a lot of work in that area. And one reason for it is we always like to tie the work that we do for employees to the impact that it has on the customers of an organization. Now, in the context of a school district, that's the students that we teach. And the connection between healthy, happy, and secure teachers and the health and performance of students is really strong. And so they're great organizations with which to work. You know, if you don't make that connection, we found that asking teachers to participate, for example, in wellness programs, which help in the domain of health, really lands poorly unless you can contextualize the invitation in terms of what impact it will have on their ability to be great teachers and on their role model for their students. And so it really makes a difference when we can invite employees to be advocates of and role models for their students, teaching them by example rather than telling them what a healthy lifestyle looks like, and having them see the connection between the fitness in particular of students and their performance in school, not only in grades, but in terms of things like performance problems or truancy as well.
And you mentioned kind of quickly there, happy, healthy, and secure individuals. Those are really, that's at the heart of your work at Habits at Work, right?
Yes, because we asked ourselves, what would it look like for an employer to really help an employee succeed in life? And what does success mean to people? And we are quite humbled by that question because, of course, it means different things to every person. So we asked ourselves, what is what we call the common man test? In other words, the answer to the question, if you're walking down the road and you said to somebody, what do you really want for your life? Or perhaps even more insightfully, what would you like for the life of your children? Almost everyone answers something along the lines of, I want to be wealthy or rich or at least financially secure. They say, I want to be happy or fulfilled or making a contribution. And they generally say something around, I want to be healthy because that's the most important thing. It gives me access to everything else. So we think health, happiness, and security are the three core attributes that define success for people in their lives. Now, some people say they want to be famous as well, and we don't go to work on that area. But we think the common denominator for all people when they look at their future and ask what success looks like includes being healthy, happy, and financially secure.
So, what does that look like in terms of a large organization? And I guess, you've worked with schools, so what's the role of the school administrators at all levels in supporting employees and kind of getting them moving toward, that healthy, happy, and secure?
Got it. Well, I think the first thing is actually connecting the dots between healthy, happy, and secure employees and the performance of the organization. Because we think that people are not unaware of, but perhaps they overlook the strong impact that those three things, healthy, happy, and secure, can have on your performance at work. So in our Brat Lab, we do a lot of research to examine what we call the dose value, or the size of the impact, the value of the impact that comes from a dose of, for example, exercise or mindful meditation in the domain of being happy, or even, what's the value in terms of better work performance when someone is not stressed about their retirement benefits because it's well funded. So the first role for administrators is reframing for employees that investing in their own health, happiness, and security is in the service of the organization and customers. Now, we tend to have this idea that the hero at a school district or at a company is the person who sacrifices their health at the altar of the organization. Particularly in school districts, we found many teachers wear their poor health as a badge of honor, as evidence that they are giving of themselves day after day. And I don't mean that in any unfair way. It really is true that many teachers, just like nurses and other caregivers, really do put themselves at the bottom of the list when it comes to priorities. So it may be students first, kids second, their own children, husbands or wives third or fourth, and somewhere down the priority list is their own health, happiness, and security. And we need to change that model so that teachers in particular can see that if they look after themselves by, for example, exercising 30 minutes in the morning, not only do they get a benefit, but they'll be twice as productive in the same day, be more mindful in the classroom. They'll make 25% fewer errors and be more able to make faster and better decisions throughout the day. In a phrase, they will be better teachers as a consequence of investing in their health, happiness, and security habits. And that's really what's behind the name of our firm, Habits at Work. It is putting what we call pivotal habits to work not only for employees, but in the service of the organization and customers, or in the case of school districts, in the service of students and their performance at school.
So, in your research, then at the Brat Lab, you've really identified what which habits get the most bang for your buck.
When it comes to being healthy, by far the most important habit is exercise, followed by healthy eating, sleep, and it turns out an unexpected fourth one is meditation or mindfulness, particularly when it comes to things like reducing stress or blood pressure in particular, leading to heart disease. Mindfulness is a surprisingly powerful habit, even more so, in fact, many factors times more effective than drug therapy. In the domain of happiness, it's things like acts of kindness towards others, acts of gratitude, so completing a daily gratitude journal, or in fact, just taking a couple of minutes each day to remind yourself what you're grateful for. Exercise turns out to be useful for improving happiness as well. And in the domain of financial fitness, the three habits are surprisingly obvious, yet few of us practice them. They are, number one, protecting the assets that you have. That's through acts like buying the right kind of insurances, or even in your house, ensuring that you have proper security. The second is saving, not only for the short term, but for retirement. And the third is paying off debt. And depending on the rates of interest and the rates of return, sometimes debt is a higher priority habit than savings. So you really can distill it down to probably no more than 9 or 10 habits in total that, if one practiced them regularly, would completely transform the future of your life. So strong is this link between habits and futures that we have a saying in our company, which is both for individuals and for organizations, habits define or predict our destiny.
So, if you think about the school districts that you've helped, where you've had gained the most traction, seen the most benefit, what did they do? What did the leaders do to make this part of the culture and to get people really investing in themselves in this way, in these three areas of health, security, and happiness?
Well, the best school districts, as a first step, go to work on getting very clear about what their vision is for success. So, understanding what their school district will look like when they succeed. What does it mean to have healthy, happy, and secure employees? How would we actually measure that? How would we know if the things that we're doing are making progress towards our vision? So, we describe that as vision led strategy development. The second big thing they do is they reframe for all stakeholders, from the school board through the administration team to teachers, through them to students, and even to the parents at home, the connection between employee habits, the employee outcomes of health, happiness, and security, and the performance of those employees at work, and therefore the impact it will have. So they need to, what we call, reframe the corporate hero in the organization. Today, the corporate hero in a school district is a teacher that works long hours, is probably exhausted and somewhat stressed, and is really giving everything, doing more with less every year as government budgets are cut and curricula are changed and expectations just go up and up. Class sizes are being increased across the nation. All of those things really drain a teacher. And so they experience their life as not having time to look after themselves. And what administrators can do is reframe for them that their first act should be investing in their own health, happiness, and security as an access to being high performers. And then the third thing they can do is make available the programs that make it easy, fun, and engaging for employees to practice these habits. Knit them into the curriculum for teacher training or administrator work days. Knit them into the business processes. As one example, we have some school districts where brain breaks are incorporated as part of every single lesson plan. So every hour during a lesson, teachers, along with their students, get up and do 1 or 2 minutes of exercise in order to prime their brain to learn better in the upcoming 55 minutes.
Now this all makes sense when you're telling me about it and I'm listening to you. But when I think about large organizations, how does you know what's the most compelling argument, or how do folks go about it? Is it just make a rational argument, show people the data, and they jump right on board, or how do we get there?
Well, a lesson I learned early on as a young actuary was data may be interesting to statisticians, but it's seldom compelling to the rest of humanity. What really gets people excited is a story that shows them how it's possible for them to make these changes in their own school district. So the research is compelling and it's useful, but if we can't paint a vivid picture of how the school district will transform when employees show up daily practicing these habits and over time as healthy, happy, and secure, if we can't make that picture real, if we can't quantify the impact that it'll have on students, I think no action will be taken. And we say that programs that help employees be healthy, happy, and secure cannot be something that happens outside of the workday or over and above it. If you just look at the domain of health, we can't have the way that work is structured cause employees to be unhealthy and then apologize to them for that by giving them a wellness program that tries to fix the damage. It just makes no sense. It's like offering people terrible food in your cafeteria and then access to Weight Watchers to help them solve their weight problem. What's much more efficient is if we restructure the way the workday operates such that these healthy habits are embedded into the work process, the teaching plan, the curricula, the way we go about working each day. And just ask yourself, wouldn't life be great if in the course of your day exercise was bundled into how you did your work, and if healthy food only was available for you, and if there was structured time as part of the day to be mindful and grateful, and if your benefit package had you be financially secure without much effort. That's what we're after when we say reinventing the world of work, especially for school districts.
I want to shift us a little bit from sort of thinking about the macro in the organization to maybe taking these pivotal habits down to more of a personal and individual level. Because when you describe that teacher who is burning the candle at both ends, and the stress and the priorities kind of a little out of whack, I see a lot of school administrators falling into that trap too. And and when I look at your website, which is fabulous, and I look at the information, I'm like, yeah, it makes sense, but why aren't more people doing it?
Well, I think the one insight is we don't actually care about our health until it fails. And my evidence for that is look at what people do each day. If you ask them, do you care about your health? People will say unequivocally yes. But if you judge the answer to that question by watching what they eat and whether or not they exercise and how they manage their lives, the answer is an unequivocal no, usually. And for most people, they say, well, the reason for that is the demands of work, stress, deadlines, kids, and other priorities. And all of that is true, but we can't rely on people caring enough to make these changes themselves. We often say, if we relied on people caring enough to be healthy, happy, and secure, the reason for our business would go away. So I say that because many organizations think what's missing is employees being motivated enough. And we think most people are motivated to be healthy, happy, and secure. If you ask them if they want that, they'll say yes, but desire isn't enough to make it a reality. Usually what they face is some kind of barrier, some kind of temptation, or a lack of capability, whether it's confidence or competence. Frankly, people just experience it as hard to be healthy, happy, and secure each day, or at least to practice the habits that lead to that. So at the individual level, I think we have to have people see that it doesn't take that much each day. And there are efficient ways of, for example, exercising while you work. Teachers have a great opportunity to be up and around and moving and have kids participate in movement exercises as part of the classroom. So much so that they could leave each day having done the equivalent of an hour in gym. We used to think that exercise, as one example, is something that's only effective if you can go and sweat profusely for an hour in the gym. And we now know 4 or 5 bouts of 3 to 5 minutes of high intensity exercise during the workday has about the same effect. Now, there may be an embarrassment to get over in what I'm about to suggest, but as one example, in our own company, every hour on the hour, the whole team gets up and we do a minute of jumping jacks or squat presses or something that's very easy to do in work clothes. And the consequence is, even on the worst days, you've gotten in a good enough workout. And so I think that's where we need to support employees, is finding ways of practicing these health habits that don't seem like or don't appear to be separate from how they get their work done. And if we can frame it for teachers as this is not only for you, but an opportunity for you to role model what it looks like for kids, I think it'll get the attention it deserves. And certainly that's been our experience.
So working it into your
daily routine is a good way to take a look at it. And I think that's probably helpful for folks because, if they view it as something extra, they're probably less likely to do it.
Absolutely. And for most of us, we say we don't have time for these things. Now, the reality is we all have the same 24 hours in each day. So what we probably mean when I say I don't have enough time is it's not a high enough priority for me. I have kids and students and deadlines and other things to worry about. So rather than trying to invent the time for this, we should find the time when people are already doing the things that they have prioritized and link these habits into those pre-existing priorities. We call it queuing one habit to an existing habit or laddering habits. You can think of it with a different example. If you wanted to do sit-ups every day and you experience that you have no time or you can't remember, one way of doing it is every time you brush your teeth, you're going to be in front of the mirror for 2 hours, 2 minutes anyway. You might as well do a couple of abs exercises while you're brushing your teeth, and a very efficient way to get it done. And for all of us, we remember to brush our teeth hopefully twice each day. In no time at all, you'd have a six-pack if you just laddered that one habit onto the existing one you have. So that's not quite a strong example at work, but I hope it gives you a sense of how you can connect one healthy habit with a pre-existing work habit.
It does, and I think that's something that eludes people is they think it has to be something completely separate. So you mentioned the 30 minutes of exercise in the morning is probably the ideal if you can get to that. And can we dig a little deeper on that? Like, what if, let's say I am able to carve out that 20 to 30 minutes in the morning, most bang for my buck with exercise based on what you folks have found?
Well, interestingly, it is close to the optimal, but there are a few other alternatives that aren't far behind. As I said earlier, breaking up that 30 minutes into 5 or 6 sessions of 3 to 5 minutes throughout the day isn't a bad alternative. So, risks aside, if you could spend each day running between classes or running from when you arrive at work in the morning, get out of your car and run to the staff room. I'm not suggesting the kind of run that necessarily has you, sprain an ankle because you're in high heels or break a sweat. It's just these short bouts of getting your heart really pumping that do most of the work in buying you the benefit. So certainly 30 minutes in the morning would be great. But if you can't fit that in, these small pieces of exercise throughout the day are optimal, are sufficient. We're often asked, when's the best time to exercise? And the classic answer to that is whenever you get it done. There is some science behind exercising in the morning being more efficient than exercising in the afternoon and the evening, partly because it builds your energy and willpower for the rest of the day, and you tend to make better choices around food having exercised in the morning. And these habits build on each other. There's an effect we call the what the hell effect, which is If you've been on a diet for several weeks and then you have a bad day, you tend to say, what the hell? And it's several weeks again before you're back on the new diet. Exercise is one very good way to build the willpower muscle that you have that allows you to practice other health habits well during the day. And it also happens to be one of the best ways to relieve stress is exercise.
So that's
So
a good transition into nutrition. So, what recommendations for nutrition and habits related to that?
Well, nutrition is really interesting because it is another habit, just like exercise, that we experience as hard. We say it's difficult to eat healthily because preparing healthy food takes a long time and it's expensive and it's much more convenient and cheap simply to eat healthy food. For many of us, the food environment, the cafeterias or the food stores around our school districts make it difficult to make healthy choices. And even for some people, we say, we don't enjoy eating healthy food. It doesn't taste as good. It's interesting to note that in the US, our food travels on average 1,400 miles to get to us. Yet we on average travel about 100 feet to get to it. And the lesson from that is generally, and in particular when we're hungry, we will eat what's close. So the best advice I can give for a school district is consider that the food environment is the main predictor of how healthily people will eat. You can spend hours and hours educating people on calorie counting and what healthy food is, and all of that's appropriate for the curriculum for kids. But you'll have much greater success if you change what's available at the school district. In particular, what kids are eating each day. We tend to think that exercise is great for improving musculoskeletal strength, when all the evidence says that exercise actually has a stronger impact on brain performance than it does have on body performance. It's similar with nutrition. We tend to think of nutrition as the thing to worry about to lose weight, and we underappreciate the important role that healthy nutrition has on brain performance. But if you're looking for dietary guidance, generally all diets work to have people lose weight in the first 6 months. Very few sustain weight loss over that, longer than that period of time. But the consensus view is coming around to the Mediterranean diet as being, roughly speaking, the appropriate diet for healthy living.
And I like that idea of if it's not there, you can't eat it. So the discipline really comes when you go to the grocery store.
When you go to the grocery store, and even when you go to the cafeteria, many cafeteria designers say, well, let's introduce some healthy food options alongside the necessary unhealthy food that we have to have because people demand it. That's what sells, and that's where we make our profits. But the truth is, as long as there are unhealthy items on offer, people will buy them. And paradoxically, when you put healthy and unhealthy food together in a cafeteria, the rate of consumption of unhealthy food goes up. So that takes a bit of explaining, and it's explained by this concept we call moral licensing, which is the reward we give ourselves when we behave well. So for example, if I worked out in this morning, I feel entitled to give myself a reward of cheesecake at lunch. In the context of a cafeteria, just seeing that healthy food is there, whether we choose it or not, has us feel somewhat good about ourselves and licensed or entitled to eat the unhealthy food. So a healthy cafeteria is not one with unhealthy and healthy food there. It is one with only healthy food there. Really what we're committed to is making it easy for employees to make the right choice instead of having to exercise their willpower at the end of half a day of teaching kids, which will drain even the most resilient person of their willpower.
So you talked about nutrition, exercise, and kind of staying in that health realm. What about sleep hygiene? You have a lot of people who wear their lack of sleep as some kind of badge. What do you think about that?
Well, it is part of this corporate hero problem that we're trying to solve, that, coming to work, having not slept, but still putting in a great day's work makes us heroic. And we all have a version of that story. You're right. But increasingly, sleep is one of the areas that is causing most of the rise in either medication use or absenteeism at workplaces. And so sleep hygiene is one area to go to work on. And it includes things like restricting your screen time after sunset. It includes things like sleeping in a darkened, quite cool room. It includes things like not drinking excessive alcohol or coffee after a certain time. So the sleep hygiene habits are quite well defined. But just to give you a sense of how dangerous a lack of sleep is, it's estimated that people who sleep for less than 3 or 4 hours a night for 3 or 4 nights in a row have the same impact on their performance as if they're coming to work under the influence of excess alcohol.
Wow.
So it really has a big impact on our performance. And one of the things that has us not appreciate that is that it not only impacts your performance, but it impacts your ability to notice your lack of performance. So being so exhausted has you not notice just how much you're underperforming. And that's perhaps one of the reasons why it's an underappreciated and underattended to health habit. But it's certainly key.
Wow, that's unbelievable. And yeah, I can't believe that. So three consecutive days of or nights of sleep under 3 hours has the same effect as being under the influence of alcohol.
Yeah, when you're measuring performance on tests that measure speed and quality of decision making.
Wow. What about meditation? You know, when you use the word meditation, sometimes people are, get a little woo woo, that's not for me kind of thing. How do you get people to kind of at least entertain the idea of having some sort of meditative practice?
Well, I'll tell you that from my own perspective, I came to the science of meditation as a complete skeptic. So I completely sympathize with the view that this is weird or woo woo, as you described it, or at the very best, nothing more or less sophisticated than closing your eyes and breathing deeply. I was humbled to see the research in blood pressure management that the impact of meditation is several times greater than the impact of drug therapy. And the more our team at BratLab has looked into mindfulness and meditation, the stronger the evidence seems to be emerging over time. So one access to convincing people is to share with them the evidence. The second is, to remove the sort of the associations between meditation and, if you were around in the 60s or 70s, the gurus from India, or the 90s equivalent of that might have also had that same kind of connotation. Meditation is nothing more or less than deliberately focusing your mind on something. And guided meditation is one way to reduce the weirdness. It just has people go through an exercise of focusing on one thing very strongly, or a series of things over time. Really, what you're trying to teach people is that at its core, meditation is practicing how the prefrontal cortex takes control over the limbic brain. Or said in simple English, meditation is an opportunity for exercising the muscle of concentration so that we're able to consciously make choices rather than just be a reactive animal, as it were. And so meditation is an exercise in strengthening your ability to deliberately apply your mind to something. And in that context, it just sounds like education or practice in being very good at concentrating on a task. And frankly, it's nothing more or less than that. Now, there are different techniques that may feel a little bit less like concentration and more like deep breathing or relaxation. There's certainly something to the science behind how a certain type of breathing relaxes the vagus nerve and sort of reduces cortisol, the stress hormone in your system. But more than anything else, meditation is just an opportunity to take your mind off what you're doing for a moment and give it a little bit of a break in order to come back refreshed and ready to concentrate on the task at hand newly.
So based on your research and what you folks have found at the BratLab, is there a magic amount of time that people need to spend meditating or having that kind of mindful practice, or is whatever you do is good enough?
Like all of the health habits, it depends. on the outcome that you're going for. So, for example, if the question is around exercise, what's optimal? Well, it depends on whether you want to run a marathon or just reduce your heart disease risk. It's the same with meditation. And our view is the optimal is probably close to 20 minutes per day, but that what's optimal isn't necessarily the same as what's sufficient. And we define the difference between optimal as the perfect amount you should do and sufficient as the minimum amount that you could do that would still have a pretty big impact. And that might be as little as 6 to 10 minutes a day in, again, short bouts of maybe 2 to 3 or 5 minutes at a time. So I think it might be quite easy for people to build it into their life if they were to do 5 minutes of meditation when they pull up at work each day, 5 minutes of meditation when they get into their car ready to go home each day, or triggered or cued to another habit that they already practice during their day. Like the example I used earlier, meditating while you're brushing your teeth is a great opportunity to do the exercise.
Maybe we'll have a bunch of people out there with much cleaner teeth because they're going to use that as a habit to link something to.
Cleaner teeth and lower blood pressure. Yeah.
Andrew, I want to be sensitive to your time. I can't believe how quickly 30 minutes has gone here, and I feel like I could talk to you forever. We might have to do a part 2. But anything that we haven't, kind of final thoughts that we haven't had a chance to get into that you think, oh, I really need school leaders to know this?
I think the key takeaway is we seem to have failed for so many years to improve the health of employees that there's a loss of faith in school districts that it's really worth the effort. And so I'd appeal to administrators to look into the research linking student fitness to performance in their grades and behavior at school, and to start to make the connection between student fitness, happiness, and security, and employee health, happiness, and security. And imagine a vision for what's possible in their school district if both students and teachers showed up every day fully energetic, undistracted by financial concerns, engaged in the work and happy to be there. What's possible if that was true in your school district? And we've seen school districts pull it off. It really is possible.
That's fantastic. So where can folks go to learn more about you and your work with Habits at Work?
They're welcome to visit our websites, bratlab.com and habitsatwork.com. I'm very happy for them to reach out directly. My email address is andrew@habitsatwork, spelled out in full, habitsatwork.com. And very happy to entertain a conversation with anyone looking to make improvements in the health, happiness, and security of their employees, indeed their performance at work, and to lead with a vision of what's possible for students as a result.
This has been fantastic. I truly appreciate your time, and I know this is going to hit home for a lot of aspiring and practicing school administrators. So thank you very much.
It's been my extraordinary honor and pleasure. Thank you.
If you made it through to the end, thank you for being patient through the audio issues. I promise I'll do better with future Skype interviews, but I hope you really enjoyed that one. I was fascinated by everything that Andrew had to say about those 3 pivotal habits, and I do hope that you'll check out his website, habitsatwork.com, and thanks again for sticking with me to the end. Thanks for listening to the School Leadership Show, a podcast for aspiring and practicing school leaders by school leaders. Send your comments, questions, and show ideas to mike@schoolleadershipshow.com. And now it's time to rate the podcast in iTunes and leave a comment. No, really, it's time to do it. So when you're done here, go right to iTunes, rate the podcast, leave a comment. Thanks.